Hi, everybody, and welcome to Cloud Cover IT. I'm Stephen, and I'm joined today by Lance Gauld and Jim Murray. It is Cyber Scotland Week on the 27th of February, and in order to have a chat about the topics around cyber, I've brought this group together so that we've got a chance to look at some of the issues and some of the things that affect companies when it comes to cyber security. I was trying to think of a topic that would be more likely to make people turn off than cybersecurity. It's one of those things that we tend to try not to think about too much. But please do bear with us. I think there's going to be some good conversation here, and I think it's going to be worth everybody's time. Lance, can I ask you just to introduce yourself as we start off here, and then I'll come to you, Jim.
Hi there, Lance Gauld, CEO of Cloud Cover IT, which I started off 11 years ago. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a big increase in the importance of cybersecurity provisioning for clientele. And this today is to chat about that and see what we can do to help.
And Jim.
Afternoon, it's Jim Murray. I'm the Group Head of Technology for Cloud Cover IT. Been around here for most of those 11 years now.
Yep.
Strong interest in cybersecurity. Basically been at the IT game for almost as long as IT has existed.
Excellent. So in my job, I spend a fair amount of time talking to clients, and very often when I ask them what their thoughts are on cybersecurity, you get a sort of barrier that comes up from people, and they kind of go, I know I've got a problem here, and they kind of don't get around to dealing with it. So I just wanted to start the conversation by asking people, what do you think is behind some of that reluctance to get involved in thinking hard about cybersecurity? I'll start with you, Jim.
It's seen as a business cost. Until we change that attitude of cybersecurity being seen as a cost to a business with no return, it's always going to be a difficult conversation. And that is the biggest and highest barrier that we have to climb when we're introducing cybersecurity thoughts to any company. Business owners see it as nothing but an unnecessary cost. It doesn't produce any return to them, so why should they invest in it?
So is that your experience as well, Lance?
Very much so. We've brought on staff in the past for cybersecurity, and it's very difficult to get an uptake from the clients. It's interesting though now with the amount of very, very high profile hits to companies that people actually know on a day-to-day basis, that attitude is now starting to change, and it's quite exciting that clients are now starting to embrace the realization this is actually going to be business critical, not just now but in the future. And if they start investing now, then it becomes part of their business culture.
I was thinking about this when we were preparing for the call, and we've all been around this industry for longer than we probably want to admit. But I thought back to May 2018 when GDPR came in as a set of regulations. And we all remember that amazing week where we were receiving thousands of emails saying, please subscribe if you want to stay on our mailing list. And none of us wanted to stay on the mailing lists or even remembered the companies. At that point, companies seemed to really embrace the fact that a change was coming, that they had to do something to make themselves compliant with that change. And everybody really got involved in making processes and changes in their business. That doesn't seem to be happening with cybersecurity as something that's there. And if you broke the rules on GDPR, then you breached some rules and you might have been pulled up or asked by an information commissioner to look at something. If things go wrong with cyber, you could lose your whole business. What do you think was the mindset shift, and how do you think those two situations could be compared? Lance?
Oh, it's very difficult to tell if the two situations could be compared because we've been approaching clients since well before 2018 on cyber. The fact that the publicity around GDPR, and it was actually the government was very much focused on it. In the instance of cybersecurity, while there's a lot of information going around, a lot of people like ourselves going to our clients saying, this is something you have to look at. There's very little from the government. The government is preparing a white paper on this subject, on how the IT companies have to give certain element of due diligence for their clientele. And that's certainly going to help us in the future, being able to go to our clients and say, the government is taking control of this. This is something you're going to have to do at some point. But until that actually happens, it's up to ourselves to try and talk to clients and make them realise just how critical this is. So yes, I think until there's some governmental input, I don't think everyone's going to understand completely how serious the situation it is.
Yeah, okay. Jim, I think you are the information officer for Cloud Cover
Yep.
IT. You'll remember GDPR all too well and have the scars.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts?
there's one big difference. Penalties for GDPR were tangible. It was clear, it was out there. Everybody knew you break the GDPR rules, there are very, very heavy penalties for doing so. Right now, cybersecurity doesn't carry penalties like that. There is this amorphous threat that you could lose your business to a hacker. And honestly, nobody ever thinks that's going to happen. They think, oh, I'll lose a bit of data, I'll restore from backups, we'll all be fine in a couple of weeks. And that's the attitude that we need to change.
It's interesting. So I'm going to come to you on this next one, Jim, which is we on more than one occasion have had a phone call, not to say, can you help us with cyber resilience, but a phone call that says something's gone really wrong. Could you talk me through what might typically happen on a morning when someone walks into the company and they have been hacked or they've fallen foul of some cyber incident? What happens to the people who walk into the office? What do they see on their screens?
You generally get 3 stages of this. You get the, oh, it's just an IT problem stage, where somebody just thinks, oh, it's just a computer being a computer this morning, and it probably gets rebooted 3 or 4 times, and they go and speak to their colleague across the office and say, is that still working? And
So this is the denial stage.
yeah, they don't believe there's something seriously wrong. It's just a PC being a PC.
Okay.
And then you'll get to the acceptance stage where they think, oh, there's something wrong. This is more than just my computer that's broken. And then they'll start to ask questions. And eventually it will get to one of the more senior or one of the technical people. And that's when you get into the third stage of the problem, panic. Because that's what happens. They flat out panic. They don't know what on earth to do. They run around like headless chickens. They get lost. Sometimes they'll phone up their IT provider in a flat panic and say, we've been hacked, we've been attacked. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just don't know what to do. And they get themselves so confused and so wound up about it that they start to make bad decisions.
Okay. Lance, you've been involved where companies have contacted us here. Typically, how long might a hack have been inside the company systems at the point when this panic day starts to happen?
Well, it's interesting. There's a number of different scenarios. The worst case scenario is that somebody has got into the system and they've been in it for a couple of weeks. They've hunted, and genuinely that is the length of time they quite often will spend in a system, and they'll go through and just find out, how do we get into this? What dark tools can we pull into your system so that we can break into your backups, we can break into your managing director's personal files, we can break into your HR system, and they'll systematically go through each part of the system and dissect it and see what they can break in to before actually uploading information. So that's quite serious. From a technical point of view for ourselves, there's so many different ways of them doing that, getting in. We had the example just a couple of hours ago of a client gets phoned up by Microsoft and says, oh, you've got a problem with your account, and the gentleman gives them password, lets them in, does everything that Microsoft asked them to do, and of course it's nothing to do with Microsoft. And this, one of the key things about this is going to be training, is actually getting people to spend money on the training. There's a number of projects out there that we can help with that, and there's a number of things that we do ourselves. But you're seeing quite a lot of people. It's not the hacker being fantastically intelligent or clever getting into the system.
No.
It's the user being very naive and letting the hacker into the system.
Yeah, far and away. The weakest link in all the security chain is the people. It's always been the people. It will always be the people. And funnily enough, training is the one element that's often neglected. You can build incredibly secure systems, and it only takes one person inside that organization not to follow process, and the whole lot is worthless.
So Jim, if we were role playing and just before we came on this call, I've realized that I've clicked on the wrong email and I've put some details in and I've been a dafty. What should I do now? And as someone who runs the systems for a company, what are you going to do now that I've just given you that call and said I've done something stupid?
Yeah, that's the very first thing that you need to do. You need to make that call. You need to realize you've done something stupid, and you need to make that call as quickly as you possibly can to your IT support person, provider, whoever that might be, and tell them what you've done.
And
Yes,
should
you
I
will probably get an earful. I won't deny it. If you phone up an IT guy and tell him, I've been a moron, I've clicked on the wrong link, you will probably get an earful from him, especially if you've got two-factor authentication involved and then you've gone and approved it on top of that. But they will then take the necessary action to secure your account. Now, in most cases, that's relatively straightforward to do. You change the password, you make sure the password's secure, you make sure nobody's been abusing it for anything else, and you move on. But that is predicated on the user telling you almost immediately that they've done this. If they wait 2, 3, 4 days and then say, oh, I might have clicked on that link, the actions you have to take then are a lot more involved. They're a lot more time consuming, and they can be a lot more intrusive for the users. So yes, tell people. That's number one. If you go wrong, tell your IT support you did it.
So in companies with a good culture, are they the culture where the IT manager is able to not give the earful and say, "I'm glad you came to me"? What is the characteristic of a company that's doing this really well?
The characteristic of a company doing this really well is that the users will come to their IT department and say if they've done something wrong. But more importantly, they will recognize that they've done something wrong. And that's one of the biggest challenges, is getting the users to recognize when they've gone wrong.
From a practical point of view, and I'm going to ask you about this, Lance, what are the typical steps that a company can make to make their systems, I don't know, do they make them more resilient to attack, or do they just make it so that if they are attacked, they're able to recover more quickly? What types of steps can a business start to take?
Right, there's a few different areas that they have to look at. First of all, we have most companies that we deal with have Microsoft 365. They have what's known as MFA, multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. That's absolutely critical in business these days, that must be enabled. Microsoft themselves say that they will give little or no support to any companies that don't have 2FA enabled. This means that if their account is accessed from anywhere other than in their own office, it will send a message to the user saying, someone's trying to log in, do you approve this? And that makes a big difference. And things will progress also. Things will progress also from the 1st of March, where it will also tell you what the location of that person that's trying to get their 2FA. So first thing, that is enable 2FA. Second thing, training. There's various training schedules that can be set up for staff to make sure the staff are aware of what's been done. We work in conjunction with SBRC, Scottish Business Resilience Centre, and we have training for charities through them. We also do our own training, and we also have companies that will actually provide training and training materials for your staff. You have a third stage where you review firewalls, review antivirus. There are products now, EDR products, where it'll actually look for intrusion entries and actually monitor all the systems on a network to see what's actually happening. Is there any unusual network traffic? You then have SIEM systems, SIEM, which are monitoring everything that users are doing, and are they actually taking data, moving data where they shouldn't be moving data? Is there an unusual activity in one person's account that actually monitors everything those accounts are doing on the network? So there's various different levels which help if there is an intrusion.
That's interesting. And the Scottish Business Resilience guys, of course, have
Just
rebranded
renamed,
as the
yes.
Cyber and Fraud Centre Scotland, and certainly the Cyber Resilience Scotland Week that we're recording this for is linked to their activity. Jim, if I turn to you at a very practical level, what does it mean for an average company to be trying to look at some of these things? And are some of them far more important than others just to get started if at the moment you're doing nothing?
There is one absolute key that wasn't mentioned.
Huh?
Prepare in advance. At some point or another, your systems will, to some extent, be compromised. There is no doubt about it. It makes no difference how secure your systems are. Sooner or later, to some extent, there'll be a compromise. The key to surviving that compromise is proper preparation. Good system security helps minimize the damage. Proper preparation in advance helps you recover your business to business as usual as quickly as you possibly can. Now, proper preparation doesn't mean technical. It means business layer preparation. It means having the correct contacts, the right people, making sure that you have the right amount of knowledge in the right places, that you understand what your business processes are, which ones are critical to your business, which ones can wait. If you have to recover your business, what has to come first? What do you have to do to bring money in the door? Those are the sort of questions you need to ask yourself before you get compromised.
So I was just thinking of a sort of potential nightmare scenario there where you might have backups and you might have 2FA, but Lance said that sometimes the hacker can have been in your system for 2 weeks. I can think of plenty of businesses that I've been in and around whose backup cycle is 2 weeks and that they don't keep any backups more than 2 weeks old. And if I came into the office and I couldn't access anything, I'm not quite sure where I go next if my backups are all compromised. Do companies sometimes end up rebuilding from scratch on a significant company?
It has happened. Probably the most notable one recently was SEPA, who basically were faced with a full rebuild from scratch. And that is the situation they found themselves in. There was very little in the way of backup that was actually usable for them, despite the fact that they had a comprehensive backup strategy in place. So yes, you do have to consider the worst case scenario. It doesn't happen very often. And the goal here is not to terrify the life out of people. These things do happen, but they don't happen to everybody every day. You can protect against a large percentage of it. Security is about making the life of a hacker more difficult. It's not about making it impossible. You will never make it impossible. One man against the internet always loses. What you can do, you can limit the damage they do. And that's the goal of all the cybersecurity efforts today. Limit the amount of damage, speed up the company recovery, and control what you can control. Don't try and build something that will never ever be broken because you just can't do it. Assume that sometime or another someone will get in.
Okay.
Consider what they can get and how you can control what they get.
Lance, I'm going to ask you, you've been in that room more than once where someone has a significant challenge. What would you say are the biggest learnings that you've taken away from being around companies who've had a cyber attack?
The biggest learning, I think, is that the cyber criminals are always trying to move one step ahead of security. Security is very important. If you have no security, the cyber criminals will look at that as an easy target and you will be targeted first. The more security you have, they have a time frame that they can spend on a project. And it is a project, it's a business for them. And if that project, the tougher you make it, the quicker they're going to eat into the time frame and the quicker they'll move on to somebody else. So it's very, very critical that you have as much security in place, as much training in place, because when you sit in that room and someone phones up and says, actually, I've got something on screen asking for a ransom, and with a picture of 5 members of my staff's passports, and you just go, oh my goodness. And it is a big fright to a company. That is not a nice position to be in. The more you can mitigate the risks you're taking, the better.
I'm going to come to you now, Jim. Without giving away any confidences or divulging any company information, give me a couple of examples of how companies have actually just made it really easy for the hacker and really hard for themselves, just with practical things that they might have done. What are the horror stories that we've come across?
I could tell horror stories that would turn hair grey, but I won't do it. Because
There's not much hair that hasn't turned grey in this
it would-
particular call
Yes.
already.
It
But so
would
go
genuinely
for it.
terrify people if I was to do that.
Tell me some of the
I
things
will-
that are making it easy for the hacker.
I will tell you the most common compromise today is business email compromise. That is
Okay.
far and away the most common compromise that you see today. The trouble with that is that what used to be a fairly minor problem, somebody got their email account hacked and it was being used to potentially encourage folk to pay money to the wrong account, or half a dozen other things that have all happened and cost businesses money over the last few years. It no longer stops at that. With the advent of cloud services, Office 365, things like that, compromising that email account becomes a doorway into the rest of the business. And that's the biggest horror story that you're going to see in IT security today. People treat it as just an email account. It doesn't matter. It's only my email. It's not only your email. It's your email. It's your network access. It's your access to SharePoint. It's your access to Office 365. It's your access onto the servers. It's your access into all the company information. It's your access into the company's database. All of these things from hacking one email. Now, biggest horror story? Biggest horror story is a company, and I will not name them, that until recently were using 4-letter passwords on Office 365 accounts. Yeah, 4-letter passwords. How long do you think it takes to brute force a 4-letter password?
I wouldn't have thought particularly long.
Less than half a second.
Okay. And maybe they were all using the same 4-letter password. Who knows?
Not quite all the same. That's a totally different horror story. That's the horror story of shared accounts and shared passwords, which is another potential disaster waiting to happen. You do not want to be sharing your passwords with other people. You do not want to be sharing them with other services. Shared passwords are a very bad idea. We have all sorts of attacks today that relate to what we call password stuffing, where someone gets a big long list of passwords from a compromised password site and basically throws them against your account to see if one sticks. And when it does, they're in. You also get published breaches from various security hacks of other sites. Twitter was one notable one recently. There's been a few others over the last couple of months where email accounts and passwords have been leaked from third-party services. And if you're using that same password on your Office email account, guess what? It's just been compromised.
I'm going to start to wrap this up now, and I really appreciate the insights that everyone's given us. I'd like to finish off with each of you giving me your 3 top tips to a business owner who's managed to sit and watch all of our talking for the last 25, 30 minutes. They've got this far. What 3 things should they do now if they have been sitting watching this and saying, that's me, I haven't taken the right steps, my backups aren't really in order, and I've no idea what all the passwords are, but some of them have only got 4 letters. So I'm going to start with you, Lance. What are your top 3 tips for someone who feels, okay, now is the day that I need to take this a little bit more seriously and take the first steps?
Obviously, bring in a consultant to actually look at where they really sit and actually analyze what their systems are like at the moment. Ensure that MFA is installed. Ensure that backups. Make sure backups are working. Make sure that you're using backups for your Office 365, because Microsoft do not back up your Office 365. They have a copy that goes back maybe 30 days. They don't back up your SharePoint, they don't back up your OneDrive, and they don't back up your Office 365. So there's key get a company involved to look at your systems, put some recommendations forward, ensure you get training, and absolutely make sure MFA is installed.
So your 3 are: understand where you are, make sure that you've got multi-factor authentication for your users so that when they're entering a system, they're having to prove either who they are or something they've got or where they are, and then make sure your backups are in order.
Yes.
Jim, would you have the same 3 tips, or would you want to add anything to that?
There are so many ways that you can go about this that, I mean, those 3 are perfectly valid and they're absolutely correct. But my number one takeaway from this is understand the risk. That to me is the absolute key to this. You have to understand that the risk from cybersecurity doesn't just apply to big businesses. It doesn't just apply to people at government level. Your business is at risk and your business could be compromised tomorrow. Understand that risk at board level and accept that that risk means that IT is not a cost. It's part of your business. And if you ignore it, the cost of ignoring it will be far higher than the costs of actually dealing with the problem. The second recommendation, don't always look for technical solutions. Don't forget the human element. People are your weakest link. Invest in the people. Invest in the training. Bring them up to speed. Support a culture of security. Yes, that means that security is sometimes going to get in the way of things that you used to do. You need to be prepared to change your business processes because a lot of security will impact on how your business does things. Last but not least, whatever you do, think about the consequences for your business of not doing it. That's the biggest problem. Everybody assumes it'll never happen. It will.
The question of when, not if. Lance, Jim, I want to thank you both for giving us so much time today. I hope that people have found value from what we've spoken about. If anyone has any questions, I believe that wherever you're watching this, there'll be a link to our website at cloudcoverit.co.uk. Do drop us a line if you want to have a chat to any of us here, and we shall see everyone on the next session when we do one of our chats through issues in technology. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.